You guys, this is the face reveal, and today is a vlog react to almost got killed by a robot at an empty road. Okay.
It was wintertime, and Christmas was approaching. I was 25 years old, and I was going to meet up with some of my friends who lived on the other side of the city. It was a 4-hour drive from my place, so I decided to take my own car instead of a local cab. It was my first time going alone on such a long drive, and I felt nervous, but excited. At midday, I packed my bags, threw them in the trunk, and went off to meet my friends.
Wow.
It was a cold day, but the roads were clear. I didn't see much traffic as it was the holidays, and people would rather spend time with their families and friends indoors and stay off the roads. Now, I'm not the type of person to go straight to my friend's house. I like to take my time. I'm a social media freak, and I enjoy posting pictures pretty much all the time. So I found the journey an excellent excuse to post some extra pictures. The road I was taking had beautiful scenery, and the place where my friends lived was even more magical. I stopped a lot during my ride to take pictures. I was having a great time by myself. Well, that was until the weather suddenly changed. It was around 6 p.m., and I was still driving. I still had a long way ahead of me. And that's when it started to snow. Not just a dusting of snow, it was thick and heavy. After 15 minutes or so, the roads were already covered with a few feet of snow. I felt anxious, since it was getting dark and I wasn't even halfway through the drive. My car slowed down, and I had to force it to run on the empty roads. The heavy snow didn't stop. I decided that I would stop at the closest gas station I could find, but unfortunately, I couldn't find one for a while. An hour later, I finally saw some lights shining from the distance. It was a gas station. I pressed the accelerator, rushed to the station, parked my car, and went inside quickly. Just as I entered, a strong snowstorm started. The gas station had a little shop tucked away with some chairs to sit on. The guy at the counter was an ordinary fellow. He didn't really talk much. He only asked me where I was going in such harsh weather. After that, I bought some chips and drinks and sat down in the furthest chair from him.
Yeah, bought some
chips. It was
chips.
night now. I sat, munched on my food, and scrolled through an Instagram. Then, suddenly, the shop's door opened. I looked up, and a very weird-looking man entered. He had long, greasy hair, was wearing a long coat, and had a very grim expression. I saw him buy some cigarettes, and he sat down a few chairs away from me.
Drugs.
He didn't look at me at all. At first, I ignored him, but then he started smoking. Since the shop was small and the smoke filled the air quickly, the shopkeeper told him to stop, but he didn't listen. He couldn't ask him to leave because of the storm, so he didn't say anything else. I, on the other hand, hated cigarettes. The weird guy was looking down, breathing very heavily as he smoked. It was as if he was breathing in my ears. So when he took out his fifth cigarette, I lost my temper and angrily told him to stop. He looked at me for a couple of minutes. His big eyes were red with anger. But then he smiled and stopped smoking. His smile was unnerving.
Weird, bro.
I sat down again and distracted myself on my phone. Shortly afterwards, my friend called me, asking why I hadn't reached their place yet. And I told him the whole story, and he said the storm would soon be over, and I shouldn't worry. When I hung up, I noticed the weird guy staring at my phone with deep interest. I was afraid that he was thinking of stealing it. But to my relief, after some time, he got up to leave. At the door, he stopped, looked back, and screamed loudly before running away, scaring the crap out of me and the shopkeeper. He didn't return after that. At 10:30 p.m., the storm ended, and I immediately left after thanking the shopkeeper. I went into my car, started it, and drove off. For some time, I drove in silence, but then I heard a noise. It sounded like heavy breathing. My heart rate shot up and my hands got all sweaty as the breathing sounded so familiar.
He's in the back of his car, bro.
I looked through my rearview mirror and screamed. The weird guy from the shop was sitting in my back seat,
I want to throw this camera
smiling
so
at me.
freaking bad. I want to.
I pressed the brakes very hard, got out of the car, and started running. I felt him running after me, too, yelling at the top of his lungs. The road was empty, and I felt hopeless as I knew he was faster than me. I only looked back once to see him running like an unnatural being and holding a knife in his hand. I increased my pace, still wondering how on earth he got inside my car. I might have forgotten to lock the door when I first left to go to the gas station. But now, it was too late for regret. My life was at risk because some psychopath was after me. Then I saw some headlights at a distance. I started waving my hands like a maniac, screaming for them to stop. They did, and it turned out to be my friend. He had come to pick me up as he was worried since I was pretty late and thought something went wrong. I looked back, and I saw that guy was gone. I got inside my friend's car and told him everything. He called the cops, and they arrived shortly after. We all went to my car first and noticed some marks made by a knife in the back seat. The cops couldn't find the guy anywhere.
That's why you always
After
make
some
sure
investigation,
you lock
they let us leave. I drove my car, and my friend drove his car back to his place. The cops never found the guy. And to this day, I still wonder what would have happened if my friend didn't turn up that night.
Okay, that was creepy. So I'll be back when we at the next video. Okay guys, we at the next video, and it says don't leave your keys inside of your house. Okay, so gotta pause it.
It was Friday the 13th.
It doesn't. Bro, why did this girl got a man voice?
Maybe 5 minutes. As I got to my door,
you don't need to know all the information.
I didn't bring my keys when I left my house. I took my cell phone out from my pocket to check the time, and it was 7:30 p.m. My parents usually don't get back home from work until 8:45 p.m. So I decided to walk to my grandparents' house, which is only about a 10-minute walk.
Wow.
As I was walking down the street,
why could you just live with each other? Yo, better run! Yo, better run, bro. Run.
I started racing, and I started to speed up.
Don't walk, run.
Follow me. I turned around again. Nobody was there.
No, they running. They running before you turn around. They running. They're scared.
I texted my grandma and told her to wait outside the door for me, and she replied with an okay. When I turned the corner, I could see the house and my grandma standing there. I started to feel calm again, like nothing was going to happen to me. But I was wrong. As I was about to cross the road to get to my grandma, I was suddenly pulled into an alleyway.
Oh!
One hand covered over my mouth and another hand was around my body. With such an abrupt attack, I couldn't get my scream out. I looked down and I could see a very dark, black hand with long, pointy black nails. Lots of cuts.
Better be quiet. You better be quiet, boy. Don't try to scream. Don't try to fight.
Its face
bro.
was getting closer to mine. It smelled like dead bodies. When I looked next to me, I could see a little part of its face. It was pale white with a tint of gray. I could tell that it was not from here. It was something that we should not know. Tears were flowing down my face. After being dragged through the alleyway, I was dropped onto the ground. When I moaned in pain, that creature stood over me, breathing into my face. Now I could clearly see its face. It had big black eyes, a big open smile with pointy white teeth, long red pointy nose.
Oh no, this dude ugly, bro. This dude ugly.
I was hoping it was just a dream. However, I felt their hand and nails were starting to dig into my neck, slowly, painfully.
They're trying to kill you and choke you.
I struggled to breathe, but it was impossible. My vision was slowly blurring. And at that moment, someone put their hands on my shoulders. Another put their head on my right shoulder and started to whisper in my ear with a strange voice. So, this is how you end up. I've been looking everywhere for this. On Friday the 13th.
I was looking for a lost
Oh, Friday
Then
the
the
13th.
creature started laughing, and then everything went pitch black and silent.
Friday the 13th. Oh,
When I opened my
that's
eyes
like a
again,
devil day.
I heard a bunch of people shouting, "He's back! He's back!"
I'll find a light switch.
I was lying in a hospital room, and all my family was standing next to me. I looked to the left of me, and there was a woman doing something next to a monitor.
What was that?
I asked her, "Excuse me, why am I here? What happened?"
Because now the
And
animals
she responded, "You were found in an alleyway near your grandma's house with scratches and cuts on your neck. As soon as your grandma saw you being pulled into the alley, she immediately ran after you. She found you laying there as pale as paper with your phone in your hand and blood running from your neck onto the ground. So she called 911, and now you're here."
A double what?
Looking her straight in the eye, I was immobilized with terror. I couldn't believe what she was saying because I couldn't remember what happened to me.
You sneaky little amoeba, you.
And then when I looked to the right of me on the bedside table, there it was. I could see my house key.
Goodbye, Spot. I guess this is the end of the road for us.
Oh, we're in the wrong route. I
This
almost
is
got
not
killed.
a nice weekend, but someone came to church, and he wanted to share his experience with anyone. He's a 32-year-old man, and his pseudo name is Mo. He's a fairly big guy, and this situation took place when he was on his way home from work.
I can barely even hear someone.
He said that he had lost his phone 1 week before this whole situation happened, so he couldn't call and get any help during this story. It was quite late, around 11 p.m. He had finished work and was walking to a taxi stop location, and when he got there, a few people were standing around waiting as well. After about 2 minutes, he noticed that there was a minivan approaching. Usually, minivans are cheaper than taxis. He felt tired that day, so he decided to take the minivan. He sat on a seat, and there was a young boy seated in the passenger side next to the driver who was collecting the fare. And then, 2 other boys who looked like teenagers also boarded the minivan and sat in the seats in front of him. Once the minivan took off, after about 5 minutes, the boy asked if they would like to drink some Coke. The boys accepted and started drinking. And they also gave it to Mark. Mark was also feeling thirsty, so he took it, but only a sip. Not much later, he started feeling drowsy. Just before he about laid his head on the seat beside him, he noticed that those 2 boys were already knocked out. After he laid his head down, he heard noises coming from the back seats. 2 people were talking in a different language. The car was passing a big signboard that showed Crest Chicken Farm. And then he finally passed out. When he got up, he found himself inside a big shed-like barn, and there were some tools on a big table. He was on the floor, and the other 2 teenage boys were laying next to him. He still felt a bit drowsy, but he managed to get himself up as he was looking for an escape. He saw that the 2 boys were still passed out, so he tried waking them, but they wouldn't budge. As Mark was kind of a big man, he tried to see if he could carry one of them, but it was hard to do because even Mark was having a hard time to stand properly. And then he heard voices. He took a peek from the door, and 3 people were walking toward the big shed, coming from a house on the hill, which was quite close to the shed. Mark panicked and tried to look for another exit. He was looking around the place, and he found one at the end of the shed, luckily. He approached quietly and escaped as fast as he could. At this point, his vision was all blurry, but he managed to find a fence door and unlocked it. He heard the people shouting, but he ignored. He just kept on running. When he finally reached his house, it was early morning, around 5 a.m. His wife was up all night waiting for him and ran out the front door as soon as she saw him. He collapsed and slept for almost the whole day. When he woke up and finally got a chance to explain to his wife what had transpired that night, he remembered about the other 2 boys who were still there. Then he contacted the police immediately. He told the police about the road signs and a big billboard for Crest Chicken Farm and other things that he could remember. About 2 weeks after, there was a police report about how they found two teenage boys' bodies in a lake and advised that when they examined the bodies, all their organs were missing. Mark just stood in fear. And as the event was too traumatic for him, Mark had to quit a job for a while.
Whoa, that's the end of today's video. That was pretty scary, guys. Peace out.